What's up, treasure hunters? We're the Hills Maniacs, and today we're going to be taking a look back at the 2004 Disney movie, National Treasure. So the reason we're doing this is because December 14th of this year, which is next week as of this video coming out, the premiere of the National Treasure Disney Plus series will be coming out, and we are going to be covering that somewhat on our channel. Like, we'll be reviewing the first two episodes at least when those premiere, because they're both premiering on the same day. So we figured we'd take a look back at the two movies that inspired the series. And I have heard that the series is actually like a sort of continuation of the movies, so some of the characters from the movies will be in the show. I think
it's a different family, though.
Yeah, I don't think Nicolas Cage will be in it necessarily, like he was in the two movies that came out.
He's not in the credits, at least.
Yeah, like, unless he makes a cameo or something. But like, I think it's still going to be maybe the same kind of adventure, just with some of the same characters. I don't really know exactly what it's going to be about, but I am looking forward to watching it, just because the movies were so fun to watch as well. What did you think, just like in general, overall, of the movie, would you say?
I mean, I thought it was a pretty cool movie. You know, at least the first time I watched it, I remember thinking, this is cool, because it brings up the question, how much of this history that they were talking about in this is actually true. And right. I mean, you can look up to see if this stuff's true or not, but again, that doesn't mean it's not. Just because someone says it's not true online doesn't mean it's not true. You know, and there are secrets that could be hidden from us, so I'm just saying some of this stuff could end up being true at some point. But it was just, I think it was a great concept. I mean, we've had like treasure hunting movies before,
Indiana Jones,
you know, before that. But I think just the way they did this, where it was passed down through the genealogy of this character, you know, from his great I think grandfather,
just
however many greats,
over the generations,
a long time ago, back during the I think they said 1840 something is when that happened. But where, you know, his Ben Gates, played by Nicolas Cage, his ancestor was with one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, and he had to go see the president, and he ended up dying before he got there, but he entrusted a secret to Ben's ancestor, Thomas Gates, and so that kind of passed down through the lines, you know, rumors of this secret treasure that he talked about,
the Freemasons,
that nobody knew about, you know, other than Freemasons and the Knights Templar, who would have known where it was. So I think it was just cool to see. You know, it's different than Indiana Jones, where he just goes out and just searches for things.
Yeah, he's just an archaeologist.
You know, this has a meaning to it. Like, Nicolas Cage's character has to find this because it's his. Yeah, everybody thinks him and his dad and his grandfather and everybody are insane, because like, you can't prove that there's this treasure, and then, you know, he tries to do that to basically clear their name of not being psychotic. You know, and I like that like family aspect of it.
Right, and I like the way they incorporated, like you said, some of these things might not be, or might be fictional, and others are fact, and that is true. Some of the stuff they say in this, like some of the numbers aren't quite as accurate, or the years and dates and stuff don't match up, and some of the stuff is they made it up for the movie, and then there are actual facts. I like the way that they tied them both together. Like, they made up their own story with some fictional things, but tied it to real American history, and used some real locations and and mentioned real things. Like, they go to, like, the Liberty Bell is one of the locations where one of the clues is.
And they mentioned like Paul Revere and the warning for the British coming, you know, with the 1 and 2 lights.
Right, and I like that they used real life facts to tie into the fictional, essentially, clues that they created to lead Ben Gates and all the characters from this movie to the treasure. And because that made it feel more like sort of grounded to me. Like, it didn't feel overly complicated. There's no alien involvement like in the 4th Indiana Jones movie, so at least this makes it look more, this made it feel more real almost, like where these things could be true in a way.
Right.
Like where it feels like it almost makes it feel like a sort of documentary about treasure hunters and things like that we would see on History Channel or something like something like that, you know. And I like the way they interwove the fact and the fiction together to make a story that wasn't like too complicated to understand. It was easy to follow
or too unbelievable.
Right, and it made it seem more believable.
I think for me though too, because one of my favorite shows on TV is The Curse of Oak Island, where they basically are searching for this treasure that may be buried on an island off the coast of Nova Scotia. And they talk about the Knights Templar and the Freemasons and how they took the old treasure from the Temple of Solomon, like the Ark of the Covenant. But they take like ancient religious artifacts during the Crusades when the Knights Templar were being persecuted and hanged and everything else, and they tried to take them somewhere else and hide them so that the governments couldn't get their hands on them, and basically say like, hey, I control the religion now, and if we don't have access to that stuff, then they can change religion and make it however they want. So I like that they incorporated that into this, because there were a lot of rumors, and we don't know if it's true or not, about George Washington and Ben Franklin and them, but a lot of people do believe that some of the founding fathers may have been involved. I mean, not with the Knights Templar directly, because that was a long time ago, but being members of the Freemasons, who were a group that basically branched off of the Knights Templar. So that actually is theories, you know, in real life. And I just kind of like that like it has that kind of connection. And I got this Oak Island feel from it when I was watching this movie again, now that I've watched Oak Island enough, you know. And it's just like this treasure hunt for these ancient religious artifacts, supposedly. I mean, National Treasure ended up being something different, but still, you know, it still works out to where they talk about the Templars, and the stories line up, you know, the stuff that you learn during the Curse of Oak Island and then the stuff that you hear here about the Knights Templar are both similar to each other enough to where it makes you believe that something did happen with the Knights Templar and then the Freemasons later on.
Right, and I think one of my favorite scenes from this movie is the whole section where they're trying to steal the Declaration of Independence. Because the main villain, played by Sean Bean, and his little group of thugs or whatever, they're going against Ben Gates, and they're also trying to find the treasure and everything else. In order to do that, they find out they have to steal the Declaration of Independence. So in order to stop them from doing that, Ben Gates and his friends decide that they have to also steal the Declaration before he does. And I like the scenes where it showed how both sides of this plan to steal the Declaration. Like, Ben Gates does it one way, and they do it the other way. And then, you know, you kind of see where they clash at the end, like right as Ben is actually escaping with the Declaration, is when they come through the door from their plan to get in to steal it and stuff. And it was kind of cool to see both sides of it. And
neither side knew the other one was there too. I think that's what made it
at that moment, or at least the bad guys didn't know that he was planning to steal the Declaration as well, because he felt the only way to keep it safe from them stealing it was for him to steal it himself, which is also still a crime. But I just thought all of that was cool to see, like the inside of each of their plans and how it was coming together and everything else. You got to look at both sides. The bad guys went up through like the sewers or something and up into the building and stuff like that, or Ben actually went into the building disguised as a tourist type of thing, you know. They did all kinds of other stuff.
Electrician or something.
They used like fingerprint scans and stuff like that to get into the room where the Declaration was being kept and all that. So it was kind of cool to see both sides of that.
Yeah, and it makes you, you know, it brings up other movies and stuff, you know, like Mission Impossible or something, you know, where you get these two really smart guys trying to accomplish the same thing, and then it ends up backfiring, you know, on one or both of them. So it's that kind of cool, like, you know, who's gonna make it, and the fact that it shows it kind of overlapping. You know, like it'll focus on Nicolas Cage and then Sean Bean and then Nicolas Cage and then Sean, you know, and it goes back and forth, and then there's scenes where it actually shows like one of them is going to use the thumbprint of a guard or something and open the door, and at the same time the other one's doing it. So then it opens the door and it's like, well, which one made it, you know, which one's there, and then it ends up being But
and the whole
that's kind of cool. So
and the whole thing was also like really tense too. Like you could feel that the characters were like they're in a hurry. They can't let anybody know that they're doing this. They had to do stuff with the cameras to make the guards not be able to see them and stuff like that. So it was all done really well, where you could feel that tension, especially from Ben Gates, because he's the only one who was actually caught on camera, or would have been caught on camera, essentially, because of the way he came in. Yeah. And he ends up making a mistake of using his credit card to buy a fake one on his way out, because they thought he was stealing one of the fake, like, gift shop Declaration of Independence. So he had to use his card there, and that ends up getting him caught later on in the movie, because they figured out that he's the one that stole it, which sets all the events of the movie in motion,
and yet it still somehow works out.
But I like that, it felt real, like if somebody was trying to do this, the tension you would get from that person, and then something going wrong and they have to adapt to the situation. Like a lot of stuff happened. He ran into people that would recognize him and stuff like that. So they did a really nice job of kind of showing that tension in that moment from both sides, really, but mainly from Ben's perspective, seeing him go in there into the crowd as the tourist and a janitor and all that stuff, working his way in there, and he just barely escapes with the thing too, and there's a whole car chase thing at the end, of course, and all that kind of stuff. But this was like near the beginning of the movie. The good chunk of the first hour of the movie was them getting the Declaration. So it was a big part of the movie, and it was honestly for me the best scene of the whole thing. Did you have a favorite scene that you liked?
I just back to that real quick. I like that you brought it up about them being in a hurry and stuff, because it really goes to show you, like, I like the part where he literally just grabs the entire case of the Declaration of Independence to finish opening it as he's escaping, in the basically. Elevator. And that goes to show you the thought that was put into it. Like, you could have it be like every other movie where he just, like, all of a sudden he's just like, all right, here, I'll just roll up the thing and go, because he just has it open. There's like 10 seconds left before a bomb goes off or something, and somebody's like, all right, well, here I go. But they actually had it where he's still struggling to get it, so he had to improvise on the spot to get it, so that he could get the Declaration out of the case and take it with him, but he couldn't do it there, and he knew he couldn't, so they had him do it in the elevator, which I kind of like, because you don't see that all the time, where somebody's in a rush and they don't accomplish the goal when they're supposed to.
Right, and that's like I said with the innovation and so, like, he was in a hurry, he had to adapt to the situation, and he even held it in front of him to use the bulletproof glass from the casing, because the bad guys were shooting at him, So that was like adapt to the situation. He's trying to get into the elevator while holding this thing as a shield, essentially, and the Declaration doesn't get hurt because it's behind bulletproof glass. So all of that was really, I thought that was the best overall chunk of the entire movie.
I think for me, I don't think I necessarily had a favorite scene from this movie, but I think my favorite thing about the movie was the way that they kept referencing the past and using that. I mean, because obviously that's, the past is what put the clues in motion, but I think that the fact that they didn't, because a lot of times it's hard, especially when you have to mix fact with fiction to make a story work. A lot of times it can get like convoluted, like we said, and so when you tell it again later on, in the movie, something could be off when you're telling it again.
Right. It
makes, but
they
kept it consistent, and they kept going back to that, and then when you find out new things about what happened and stuff, and it's really cool that they were able to keep it where it was supposed to be without making it like, oh yeah, this date changed or something from from what we said before, So I kind of like that.
And even both characters are seen making mistakes too throughout the movie. It's not like either of them is perfect. Like they'll read something and assume it's this thing, but then here it's actually,
it means
it just clicked in my head. There was also this thing happened before that in history that might be what this is actually referencing, and things like that. You get that both sides of it and how both sides figure out the clues and stuff like that, because Sean Bean's character doesn't have the Declaration because Ben does, so he has to adapt to the situation, like look up history online and things like that and try and solve the riddle in a different way. So you get that. I'm glad that they showed both sides throughout the whole movie, like,
right?
And then how they clash when they come together, and they have to use each other at the end and stuff like that. There are a couple things that like didn't really make sense, or I just felt kind of took me out of the movie a little bit. One of them is that there weren't really any repercussions for Ben Gates and the people that helped him accomplish this. Like, they literally stole the Declaration of Independence, and at the end they get whatever. And they essentially get off scot-free at the end because they found the treasure
and they
gave it to the police and stuff, and and they even get some of the money from the treasure that they found. It's like, meanwhile Sean Bean's character gets arrested because they tricked him and stuff like that. And they led the police
into a church.
No, but they should still have gotten arrested as well for stealing the Declaration and everything really that they did. They also went into government property and things like that.
I mean, but you see things like that happen all the time in real life. Somebody makes a deal and doesn't go to prison. So it's not that far-fetched to believe, but yeah, you're right. This is
the equivalent of murder almost.
You steal the Declaration to prevent somebody from stealing the Declaration.
That makes sense to me.
I mean, you're still responsible for it happening,
Right.
So
that's what I mean. He still should have been arrested because I feel like they did it. Oh, he didn't get arrested. They live happily ever after and all that for that happy Disney ending that you'd get in these kind of things. But the happy ending was them finding the treasure, and then they should have had repercussions afterwards. I know they wouldn't have been able to.
Of the treasure.
I know they wouldn't have been able to have like a second movie, but I think that would have made it feel more real if they had been in prison for a long time or whatever, and suffered some kind of consequences for their actions, not just oh, you're free to go and we'll give you some of the money from the 1% of the earnings from the treasure when we cash it all in and stuff like that.
Stuff does happen to get them in trouble in the second one. So like even at the start of the second one, they're not where they're at now. Like they're
I know,
people
but it's
stop believing them or something. So but yeah, I think for me the worst thing that happened in this is right at the end. They get down to where the treasure's supposed to be, and Sean Bean's character is gonna leave them there. And they're getting ready to leave, and they have to give him a clue to throw him off because they know that the treasure's still there. They just have to go down farther, but he doesn't think it's there. He thinks it's somewhere else. So they're trying to trick him to go somewhere else.
Right.
And the movie focuses on. I know he's not a historian, and it showed him before looking things up, online or whatever. But the story that they give him is about the one light and two lights, one if by land, two if by sea, that they warned Paul Revere how the British were coming during the revolution and stuff. And they had it where they told him that the one lamp mattered, and that was the next clue, and you had to go to the church in Boston and find it and stuff. And the thing is that Sean Bean just believed it and just went to this church in Boston to look for the next clue, because the British came by sea, so it would have been two lights, one if by land, two if by sea. But he didn't even think to question that. He didn't go. He looked up everything else in this movie. He looked up the Declaration. He Googled one of the things later on about the Liberty Bell and stuff. Throughout the movie, we see him or his people researching this stuff, and then all of a sudden you're just going to believe. You didn't catch on that they told you there's one lantern, even though you're supposed to be this person that's very smart and not able to be bluffed, and then you get this thing. I mean, I guess it could have been just a thing of like, you just want to get out of here type of thing, so you'll just whatever, and so you just believe anything because you're going to leave them there anyways, and you just really want to find this treasure, so you're anxious to believe it.
They did say, what if we're lying? And he said, well, are you? And he said, well, if essentially, if we are, we know where you are.
He didn't care because he could come back and get them. But it's just, it's one of those things that it's like, you build up this movie of making him and his team like these people that are able to have these resources. Because he even says in the movie, Ben says in the movie that Ian, which is Sean Bean's character, is probably the person with the most resources ever, because I guess he's rich or something, you know. So like he could have resources to figure this out, and he seems to know a lot about history, anyways. At least the basics of history and the Declaration and all that stuff. So he should have known that the British didn't come by land, so it should have been 2 lanterns. So that story should have been just a bunch of crap,
right?
But apparently not.
Especially since that's what leads to them getting captured at the end.
Yeah.
Because Ben tells the FBI where they are,
Right.
and they get there first and end up arresting Ian and his people. I don't know. It did make him seem kind of dumb, and it was that dumb like villain defeat at the end type of any last words type of thing,
Right.
you know, stuff like that. And that's one of the problems I have with the movie too. Was just a lot of the situations that the main characters, were involved in felt a bit too easy to get out of. Like that,
Right.
what you mentioned, where he tricks him into going somewhere for the treasure so that they can get out through the treasure room that they end up finding. And there's all these, they escape the police a bunch of times throughout, bunch of missed gunshots during the chase
Yeah.
scenes and stuff like that. It's like a lot of it felt a bit too easy, but not like super like there were difficulties for them throughout the movie. Like I mentioned, they
Right.
had to adapt and improvise to situations, but it still felt a lot of it like some of the clues seemed like a little bit too easy for them to figure
Yeah.
out. And that was kind of one of the things that I didn't really necessarily like about this. That's just a little nitpick, I guess.
I mean, even there's a scene where Riley, who is basically Ben's like computer guy,
understudy computer guy type of person.
he sends in this kid, and he's paying him to go into the museum or whatever, and where the Declaration is, and or the archives building, and look at other documents and get these letters, and he puts them together and makes words to get one of the clues. But first off, how did he know there were other clues on these other documents? Second, what are those other documents? Because I don't think we ever really find out unless it showed like a close-up of the document itself. And then third, how do you know what letters to use anyways? So I guess it was just all the capital letters on the document, I guess. I mean, it was just kind of random how they threw it in there. You know, I know that's how they got that clue, but like Riley could have went in by himself real quick and just jotted all them down and taken them home and then figured out the clue. He didn't have to sit there and figure it out while the kid was writing down the letters.
Well, no,
you know, because that's what ended up leading Sean Bean's character to find out that they were going to the Liberty Bell, because he ran into the kid and he paid the kid to give him the last 4 letters of the thing, and they were able to Google Stowe, I think it was STOW, who's one of the creators of the Liberty Bell, and so they figured out that they were going to Independence Hall in Philadelphia for the Liberty Bell and stuff, and that's basically how he got. So basically, because of that, he found out that they were in Philadelphia.
A lot of it was like situational and like just convenient. Like, oh, he's here, Ian's here at the same time as Ben, and he sees Ben running across the street or something like that. That's what I said. A lot of it felt a little bit too easy to drive the plot forward, but it wasn't too bad. Like, there's a lot of movies out there where like everything works out in their favor. Like, probably it's even worse in Indiana Jones, I would say. Like, there's a random rope for you to grab onto or whatever, you know, stuff like that. But I don't know. I mean, it's not a big deal. It doesn't like ruin the movie. It just feels like some of it was too easy for the characters to get out of. I think this movie is like really rewatchable. Like, I've seen it a bunch of times. You know, it's fun to just sit down and like think about everything that went into making this movie, because the people that, like the directors and all that, would have had to know some history of America for any of this to even make sense, and then they had to, of course, like I mentioned earlier, make up some stuff in order to, or kind of tweak a little bit of things
so that it still makes sense,
so that the plot makes sense, but it's not quite accurate.
Right.
But it was still, it's fun to watch because it does feel a little bit realistic, and you do, like I mentioned, you get those tense moments and everything with the characters, and the acting was on point pretty much. You know, you never felt like, oh, this guy's stale and blah blah blah. You know, everything felt what it was meant to be. And I'd give this movie, like, it's not perfect, obviously, no movie really is, but I'd give it like a 3 out of 5 maybe, or a high 3 out of 5, something like that.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. Yeah, it's one of those that's not, you know, it's not horrible, it's not the greatest movie in the world, obviously. There's a lot of things that are kind of just thrown in there or whatever, like we talked about. But it's still, I'm not going to say it's a bad movie because I liked it. I liked the second one better, but I still really like the first one. And I do like what you said with the actors kind of, the way they portrayed their characters and stuff. And I also like that even in the end, we're not really supposed to hate the bad guys in this movie because they're all on the same quest. It's just about how they go about doing it that makes them seem like bad people.
Because
when really they're because they try to kill Ben and they kidnap his father and they try and kill Riley and Abigail and stuff, but it's still like you're not supposed to, because even they end up working together and they kind of save each other when they're in the cave trying to get down to where the treasure is.
And they were even working together at the beginning of the movie too. Like they were just explorers and treasure hunters together that ended up going on different paths to get there because they didn't agree on some things.
So I mean, yes, you have to have a villain, but it's not necessarily a villain that we're supposed to hate. I mean, you're not supposed to agree with him necessarily, but he's not really a bad guy. He's just the way he went about doing things was worse than what we would expect to happen, I guess.
Right, and you could almost argue that if Ben Gates and all them weren't in this movie, that Ian and his side of things would be the main plot of the story. He'd be the main character. He's the treasure hunter looking for the treasure and stuff like that.
Right.
But let us know what you guys think down in the comments section. If you've ever seen this movie, did you enjoy it? Or even the sequel for that matter. We're going to be covering the sequel as well, so keep an eye out for that. That'll be coming out later this week as well, and then we'll talk about the first 2 episodes of the series that comes out when that premieres, and then maybe do some other videos about it as well. So keep an eye out for those. Also, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more.
Remember, leave the scumbaggery at home, and we'll see you guys in the next one.